48 kills, Tarek GG, it's What the Moose here, and today I've got a guide for you guys about playing mid lane and about how you can improve at this role. First of all, there's one really important piece of information everyone should know with regards to the champion that they're playing, but also with regards to what champion the enemy is playing, and that is the roaming farming continuum we see coming up on screen now. You can use this continuum to place your champion and the enemy's champion based on what they rely more on, whether it's roaming or farming, or maybe there's slap bang in the middle. But each champion will have a different place and you have to adapt your playstyle accordingly depending on where they lie on the continuum. Right in the middle we have champions like Ahri, Twisted Fate and Sion, whose AoE allows them to farm a lot but also get about 50% of their gold through roaming and ganking due to their high mobility. Then closer to the roaming and ganking end we have Fizz and LeBlanc, obviously not right to the extreme because they do need a degree of farm, but their mobility allows them a lot of ganking potential and they will be roaming more often. And closer to the farming end we have champions such as Galio, Morgana and Mordekaiser, whose AoE allows them to farm a lot. They're not so mobile, so they rely more on the team fights and later game stages. The point I'm trying to make with this is you have to constantly be aware of this continuum every single game. If you're playing champions closer to the left, such as Fizz and LeBlanc, and you're against champions closer to the right, like Galio and Mordekaiser, you're never going to win at a straight up farm battle unless they're really bad. So you have to adapt your playstyle accordingly, attempt to push the creep wave to their tower and roam to other lanes for potential ganks, forcing them to make the decision whether they lose gold and experience or they leave their lanes vulnerable. Similarly, if you're closer to the right of the continuum, playing champions closer to the left, you have to prevent them from pushing to your tower, you have to take control of your wraiths and the enemy wraiths if possible, make sure you get early river wards and alert your lanes every single time they go missing, so they end up losing out on farm and wasting time on ganks that are never gonna happen. If you feel you're stronger and you can follow them, you can counter gank, or even if you're Galio, consider taking spells like teleport to help bot lane when they do roam. By all means do that, but don't do it at the cost of losing out on farm. Similarly, champions closer to the left of the continuum do tend to pick up Deathfire Grasp later in the game as they are the bursty assassin type of mages. You can consider picking up an early Cage's Lucky Pick or running gold per 10 runes. I did do a kind of article on this on skgaming.com. I'll put a link in the description so you guys can check that out and make your own decision. You guys might not agree with some of my placements on the continuum, but that's fine as long as you have your own placements and as long as you're aware of the fact that different champions rely on different things. And your objective as a mid laner is to try and get as close to the middle of the continuum as possible by doing whatever you can. And some things I haven't mentioned in this video I'll save to a later date. Some things you can work out for yourself, but that is the aim of the game. You don't want to be a Fizz who farms mid all game because that isn't using your character to its fullest potential. The next thing I want to talk about is the placement of wards, where you should place them, when you should place them, etc, etc. And I honestly think that the use of wards is really over exaggerated. When people ask how to gain ELO, when you watch pros, everyone says the same thing, wards, 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 and everyone gets bored of it. And it's true to an extent, because I think that other than a few essential wards, you can have too many wards. They're used to compensate for poor map awareness, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying wards are useless, I'm saying you should have a few wards, a few essential places every game, and some situational wards depending on the enemy team. For example, in this game I was really far behind the Gragas. We noticed he was making use of his advantage by taking our wraiths as well as his. So you saw in the clip before and in this clip we have our entrance to the wraiths warded, we see him go in and we're able to pick up a kill on him more than once, and he actually ends up baiting a couple of his teammates in on more than one occasion. So by him trying to increase and maintain his advantage, he's actually lost his advantage by the placing of clever wards. But generally speaking, in games, you should have a ward at the enemy's wraiths, the entrance to their wraiths, and you should have a ward at the curly bush on the opposite side towards enemy blue buff in the river. You should only, as a mid lane, place one ward, or you should only have to. Your jungler or support should cover the other one, but if they're not, don't be afraid to buy more than one ward. Those are general wards, but like I say, there are situational wards. Are they roaming? Are they ganking a lot? Do they have a TF? This all affects where and when you place wards, and you have to just be aware. There's not a specific ward place each game, and wards are not the be all and end all if you have good map awareness. And I know I'm going to get slated so much of saying that, but I promise you it is true. But another big tip for playing mid is every game, when it's safe to do so and if you can make it unobvious, you should be picking up your wraiths when your jungler's not there or he's ganking, because they're on such a short respawn timer. And if it's safe to do so, pick up the enemy wraiths, but you have to be careful where the enemy jungler is, and you have to make it really unobvious and make sure it's not warded. Similarly, if you're playing against Mordekaiser, Gragas, or someone who is taking your wraiths, put a ward down there, let your jungler know and let your bot lane know so they can react and help you capitalise on that. The next thing I wanted to discuss is the fact that mid is the most skilled role in game. And I'm not saying that every mid is better than every bot player, I'm simply saying that the role itself requires the most skill. And you may disagree with me there, but the fact of the matter is it has the most mechanical skill and skill shots, as well as the fact it has the biggest influence on the early to mid game with roaming and ganking. Compared to that of an AD carry who relies on the support early game and their teammates to protect them mid to late game, it doesn't have a lot of mechanical skill and it's pretty much just positioning, orb walking and farming, and is perhaps the most important role despite that. Why is this relevant to this guide, you might ask? Well, the fact is every action mid has a huge consequence and effect on the rest of the game. Even little things such as the enemy seeing you on the map has a massive influence over every single lane. If people are considering tower diving bot lane, if people are considering going for Drake and they can see you on the map, they know it's safe to do so. So if you can abuse the fog of war when the creeps are pushed to the enemy tower, or if you're not doing anything in particularly useful, even if you have no intention of helping the bot lane, even if you have no intention of stopping dragon, use the fog of war, because when the enemy can't see you, you're a massive threat. You could be anywhere, you could be in any lane, and that's something you have to abuse. Taking this even further, if you're playing a champion like Twisted Fate and you're out of range for a TF ulti, you see your team getting dived bot, pop the ulti because it will probably make them back off. With Nocturne as well, although it's not mid, if you're out of range, use the ulti because it makes people panic. They will assume that you are going to ulti and it will be a risk for them, so they will probably back off. Another sound piece of advice I have is regarding counter picks, and the fact I do not believe there are any counter picks mid. Whilst there may be champions that can do a lot of damage to you, they can poke you out of lane, they can zone you maybe if you don't take the right runes, the fact of the matter is you're not actually playing against the enemy mid, you're playing against the whole of the enemy team. Whilst that's not true for top and bot, it definitely is true for mid, and any poking, harassing and zoning can be immediately mitigated if you take the right runes and masteries. And some people are even taking magic resist marks at the minute, but I believe that magic resist glyphs flat are enough to mitigate the damage and keep you in lane. You just have to think of mid lane as a means to an end, and it's not the all out harsh laning phase of top and bot, it literally is a means to an end of you getting kills elsewhere, getting ganks elsewhere. There's not a lot of trading that happens mid unless there is a jungler gank, which is quite rare because it is the hardest lane to gank. So as long as you build correctly, make sure you take the right runes and masteries, there's absolutely no such thing as a counter pick mid. The next thing I want to talk about is reacting to ganks, and sometimes it isn't an option to be able to run back into your tower, and in cases like this you have to run into the side bushes and try and bait them in if your jungler is waiting there. But even if your jungler isn't waiting there, they shouldn't follow you because there's an extremely high risk that your jungler is there unless they can see him elsewhere on the map, or they for some reason have that bush warded. But it's definitely better to run into the side bush. Most people will stop chasing you, and if your jungler is there you will get a nice counter gank if you're stronger. And when your jungler is waiting for a gank, you cannot go charging in and make it extremely obvious because they will just back off unless you can flash CC them to make a guaranteed kill. You will have to manipulate your movement, go to the opposite side of the lane that your jungler is on, try and make them move round to there, but they could have it warded. Failing that, wait until they're going for a close range melee last hit or a risky last hit before you engage on them, and it is a case of trying to bait them into thinking that they can kill you when actually you're in a better situation with your jungler. Sometimes though, they will be engaging on you because they have a jungler gank, so that's also something to consider, how you can disengage if things go wrong. The later the game goes on, the weaker AP carries become and the stronger AD carries become. Your job in team fights is quite simply to maximise your damage before you die, get your ultimate off before you die, and make sure you prioritise the right targets, whether it's bursting the enemy AD, bursting the enemy AP. You don't want to be wasting your cooldowns, wasting your ultimate and burst on the wrong targets, because once it's gone at a later stage, it could be crucial in losing the team fight. In some situations you're going to want to ulti earlier in the team fight, where in other situations it's better to hold your ulti towards the end, but like I say, you'll know it when it happens. It depends on the champion you're playing, but it also depends on the enemy team and how your team is doing based on kills and deaths. So to summarise this video, remember to take into consideration the farming roaming continuum, where your champion lies, where the enemy champion lies, and adapt your playstyle accordingly. Use the continuum to know whether you need to place offensive wards or defensive wards by your wraiths, but don't overuse wards, and make sure to only use essential wards and situational wards depending on the enemy team. Remember, there's no such thing as a counter pick mid, because you're not playing against the lane, you're playing against the entire enemy team, providing that you build and rune correctly. Finally, and perhaps the most important tip, is that early to mid game your presence has a massive influence. Even if you're not planning to do anything, make the best use of the fog of war, make the enemies under pressure, make them scared you're going to be there, and make the best use of your time. Don't be standing mid farming when you could be doing something more useful, or you could even be baiting a gank. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please drop it a like and comment if you did. Please subscribe if you like what I'm doing, and stay up to date on Twitter and Facebook in the description below. I'll be posting a lot of cool stuff on there, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys have in the comment section and on Skype. Until next time, peace.